No, I'm not sorry, or you. I'm not sorry at all. I mean, I'm actually glad. I am glad that I am not. Yes, us and them. I'm glad I'm not them. I guess we're glad we're us, but it's still. As I asked John in the last hour, I just said, so how do you get out of this oppression and get your mind onto the Lord and have feel His presence and glory and just walk in that and without fear and just like a kamikaze, and then I'm thinking 2012, the movie, the Woody Harrelson character, I forget his name now, but you know the one I mean, that was standing at the Yellowstone, and he was like just a kamikaze broadcaster. There he was with his headphone, his backpack. He was broadcasting the explosion of Yellowstone and just cheering it on. and that's what I mean, that reckless abandon, that wonderful feeling of having overcome it all. And I think that's what's been on my mind to talk about. And and we mentioned in the last hour, it's Zeph Daniel here. This is the Z Live portion. You just heard ZF and T, Zeph, Frankie, and Trish. Hello, Zeph Daniel, WWCR, and this is the last bastion of actual radio left. And I guess if the apocalypse is coming on October 28th, 2011, then we don't have long to wait. I guess that's good news, right? Let me get my guest in here right now. He needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Frank Whalen, who for years had the most cutting-edge show in the history of radio. And he went on with this for about a decade of just broadcasting everything he would allow me to go on and on and on and on. But when people thought I was completely nuts, Frank gave me a chance. Okay, back then to put my testimony out there and put it out there, and he listened, and he compared notes with himself, and he was courageous, and he's still continuing down that same path, and obviously a complete nonconformist, and he's the most uncompromised guy that's ever been in radio, that's been in official radio. I'm kind of in official radio, but it's not like he was actually in the corporate world and doing what he does, which I don't know if you really can appreciate that. I guess you could, looking back on it. And it's duly noted, believe me, that Frank, the contributions Frank has made over the years and the risks that he's taken personally and everything. Let me just get him in here. Frank, you there?
I'm here.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's great to talk to you again. It's... as this apocalyptic changes are coming and the time is speeding up and everything is getting haywire, it's easy to go a few months and then all of a sudden have to go, I haven't talked to Frank in months, and then here we are again.
I know, it's wonderful though, and you always make me feel so welcome here, and thank you so much as always. It's always an honor, and anytime that I get an invitation from you, I'll drop whatever I'm doing and I'm there. So.
You know that back in the days of the X in Arkansas,
Yeah.
You were totally bucking the trend before anyone even knew what was going on. I mean, there you were on corporate radio, and you were saying the things you're saying today and putting people like me on back when, they'd written me off as a complete lunatic, and and you backed me up, and you backed up a lot of other people too that had a lot of information that they thought they were crazy, but you just really followed your heart, and I think you're heroic and need to be commended completely for that. And don't worry, that's not forgotten. That's in the record, Frank.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
That's there. Your courage is duly noted, and we need that kind of courage today. I started looking up in the internet this whole idea of October 28th, 2011 is the end of the Mayan calendar?
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, according to, it's pretty interesting. And automatically whenever stuff like that comes up, whenever a date is named, I'm always like, yeah, whatever. I'm skeptical of that. But what's intriguing about this is the evidence that they put out there. And then they actually say, this is not going to be the end of the world. So they're not claiming to do what that preacher was doing, collecting his billions of dollars and putting up billboards and whatnot, saying, this is the day that everything wraps it all up. That's not what they're saying in this video. Yeah. And I should point out, by the way, that I haven't watched this video in probably about a month and a half. So it's been a while. I did not make the video. I was affiliated with it. I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form. So let me just preface everything I'm going to say. People should do their own research, as always, and check it out for themselves, because I'm sure I'm going to put there quite a few facts in the video. But the gist of it is that, yes, with a few celestial bodies, as you'd mentioned, Elenin and what the blue Kachina, red Kachina, whatever it was, that these celestial bodies, as they come into alignment with the planet, it disrupts the gravitational field on the Earth and causes earthquakes. And they've actually lined up, from what I remember in the video, 3 separate times, which coincided with some massive earthquake activity here on Earth, most notably, of course, the Japanese quake.
Right.
Okay, and the next time the alignment comes will be October 28th. So they're not necessarily saying end of the world, but they're saying cataclysmic change, probably an earthquake of some sort. Now, given the fact that we've had some substantial ones as of late, and, I'm, a big stone and a big throw, granted, but a stone's throw from the New Madrid Fault over here at the edge of eastern Arkansas. And, of course, you're relatively close to San Andreas. We got some big things to be aware of.
Yeah, it's, earthquakes, but there's a guy that is saying that a guy by the name of Kalinin, or I forget his name now. I'm going to have to go back and get his name. His name is, and this, Carl Johann Kaleman, something to that effect, but he's also tied it in with the Bible.
Yeah.
And is basically saying, he had predicted the 2008, financial collapse based on the same information of the Mayan calendar. And then that was a precursor leading up to the final finale, which would be October 28th, 2011. Mm-hmm. And I think, he's just saying it's not December 21st, 2012. It's October 28th, 2011, and it's coinciding with the end of the Bible, saying that it is exactly 7,000 years from the flood.
Interesting.
And trying to correct the calendar that most people have it wrong, and it's exactly 2,000 years from the birth of Christ, which he claims to have been in October of not in, obviously, in December, but in October. And that the Mayan calendar has got the same problem that the birth of Christ had, in a way, in that, with this December thing, in terms of, he's also saying that it's a birth that's going on, and I've often looked at the end times as a birth of something new, which he calls the New Jerusalem, which I call a new dimension. The heavens and the earth are washed away, and what there is the New Jerusalem, which is another dimension of life that we will be going into. And a lot of the wicked, obviously, without a relationship with Jesus, you don't pass into that unless you're spiritually prepared to do so. Mm-hmm. And that's
I concur with that.
That's just like a summary. So, this is tying it in with this biblical perspective. And with this New Jerusalem, with the end of time, and then I start getting interested, because that would, and that also, remember, is it John Moore, Trish? Yeah. John Moore.
You're talking about Planet X.
He was saying the same thing, that basically people are looking to 2012, and 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't know, forever, I guess, he's been saying that they have the dates wrong. It's really in 2011 is what he was saying.
Absolutely. And you think about that. Think about all the preparations that went into Y2K, for example. Now, granted, that was more of a created and controlled, hype, insofar as to say, that was the government sort of initiated. Oh, by the way, our computers are flawed. We never anticipated that the years would actually go on. So we screwed up with the programming. Sorry about that, but everybody get ready. And, of course, the media responded and built, and then the alternative media kind of said, okay, let's deal with this from how do we get ready, which was good. But at the same time, the scare tactics, selling the fear, it's irresponsible. So anyway, the point is that everybody knew a day to expect something, whatever that something would be. Now, the December 21st, 2012, that's kind of been out there for as long as I can remember. And as the date gets closer, people would be more cognizant of that. Well, what better way to throw them off than to bump it back a year? People say, in 2012, I'll start getting ready. In 2012, I'll start preparing. In 2012, I'll start praying. In 2012, I'll start trimming the fat. Whatever the case may be, this is the ultimate way to deceive, and it explains quite a bit. The Planet X thing and how that would tie in with the Bible. I've always wondered that, but the conclusion I've come to is that any massive body moving throughout the solar system is going to have a gravitational pull. And if it's pulling something of substance, meaning a couple of stable chunks, all it's going to take is one of those to make an impact here. And then you've got, the wormwood aspect. And then, of course, you've got the Project Wormwood that's run by the Australian government and the United States government down there in Australia. And their supposed role is to prepare and defend against near-Earth objects and impact. Well, there's really no way to defend against it. So, in the very fact that they named it Wormwood indicates that they're expecting failure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's a lot of evidence. And then what do you make of the this whole idea that with the Elenin alignment, which was on September 26th, Obama and company and many other people were in Denver. Now, I don't know what took place there, but I mean, there was a lot of talk about people going underground at the Denver International Airport, DIA,
Mm-hmm.
and that this is somehow a preparation that the elites are making to get underground to ride this thing out.
I don't know much about that particularly, but I would say that I'm always going to be inherently skeptical, because I did hear people last week, sort of flipping out about this whole thing. They're like, this comet's going to hit us on the 28th or 26th of September, and I was like, no, it's not. And people said, oh, well, this is going to happen too. I think that the very fact it didn't happen, the powers that be have access to all these observatories and telescopes,
right.
Things that we do not. I think that they pretty much knew. It may have been a date to schedule a drill, for example, something like that.
That's what I'm thinking. There was a drill in Denver just to go to Denver, to be there, to be ready to go underground if necessary, and then they moved on from there. It was like a drill day. And
that's what I would say. If it happened, it was probably just a drill.
And then, but it was just a rehearsal for the. And on the other hand, they're still calling for like tax reform, or I'm not saying tax, politics, campaigning, jobs bill, and all that. They're going through but wouldn't they be less going through the motions if something were really going to happen?
Possibly. I think when you think about it, it's kind of like saying that you have a bank account. That bank account expires on a certain date, and any money that isn't spent, you can't really keep it. There's no reason not to spend campaign money at this time, because it's not really going to have any value after the fact, is it?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who's going to accept dollars in a post-apocalyptic society?
And
So
where are you going to where are you going to cash your gold in?
Well, that's another thing too. I don't know. It's a good question, and it's funny you bring that up, because I was talking to a friend a couple of days ago, and she was telling me how she and her husband were talking about all this, and they were saying they were just sort of bemoaning the fact that they never got ready for anything. They never planted a garden. They never stockpiled food. They never, stockpiled, weapons or gold or silver or anything like that. And I said, well, neither have I. And they said, well, why did you not? And I said, I didn't have the resources to do that.
Right.
And I've always kind of firmly believed in the predestination thing, that if something, that everything is possible with God. If God wanted me to have those things, I would have those things. If I had the resources, I would have done those things. So, in order to sort of let myself off the hook and not be one of those people who's like, oh, if only I had done this.
Yeah.
I just think, if I'd had the resources, I would have, but I didn't, so I didn't. It's okay.
What we're talking, Frank, what we're talking about here is so cataclysmic that the whole idea of money is absurd to begin with. The whole idea of stockpiling anything is absurd. It's all absurd. It's like sitting in front of a huge tsunami, and you're on the beach digging a little hole in the sand and sticking your Twinkies under there and stuff, hoping that you'll just let it pass over you. It's ridiculous.
I think Twinkies and cockroaches would survive an apocalypse.
Yeah, well,
with all the preservatives and that crap, I believe it.
But if this is really the birth of a new world, then preparation would be getting ready to go through the birth process with Yahweh in His perfect creation. It wouldn't be to pray away the creation as it's timed. And if you look at the Bible, it's all everything is timed. The feast days are timed. The birth of Christ is timed. The prophecies are all timed. And the end of time is timed. He wrote the end from the beginning. So we wouldn't be praying, Lord, I pray your creation doesn't come to fruition. What I think it is that the actual creation, the actual unbelievable birth of this world that Yahweh has created, which is perfect, is coming in now. And so we can either be a part of that birth process, or we can be like the the Satanists and the characters holding the earth dwellers, the Bible calls them. We could be earth dwellers and just go and try to hold on to our piece of dirt.
Yeah, or like Sodom and Gomorrah, saying, "Hey, everybody, the city's about to be destroyed. Forget it, man. I got this bottle of wine. I'm good to go." There's a lot to pay attention to, and what I had mentioned to this gal when we were talking, and she was sort of upset that she hadn't prepared, and I said, listen, honestly, if you win the lottery tomorrow, it's probably too late. I said, you're not going to have time. I said, regardless of whenever something happens or not, I said, the time for all that stuff has passed. Now is the time for the most important preparations, which is never too late for. Spiritual preparation, without question, is number one. That's the thing that everyone can do, should do, and can do right now, regardless of money, wealth, time, all that stuff. You can do this. Secondly, fitness. And I was telling her this. I said, listen, I don't care how much gold, food, and weapons and all the stuff that you have in your little fortress. I said, if you can't walk a block without getting out of breath, without getting a stitch in your side, you're screwed. Plain and simple. It's just not going to happen. So I've been led to really focus on that a lot, to focus on health and fitness and, of course, without question, the spiritual side of things. That's always come first. But these are things people can do right now.
Well, anyway, the interesting shifts that are going on here, and what they're talking about is, a complete shift also, I believe, in consciousness, which is coming in, which a lot of people are going crazy because they're fighting it. I think the only way to remain intact is to go with it, because again, it's Yahweh's perfect creation. So what we would call a doomsday, and people think you can pray it away, would be foolish because of the fact that he had already written it in stone. And and the end result is that it's good. And
exactly. Well, think of it this way, Zeph. I mean, who calls it doomsday? The world.
Right.
Well, look at the world systems. It would be doomed for the world systems, but would that really be doomed for people like me and you?
No, the Lord's going to cut down. It's all part of that birth process. In other words, somehow
it's a good thing.
The good versus evil part that we've had here on earth is all part of the process of giving birth, not just to some new dimension, but also a consciousness, also these conscious beings who will be, in glorified bodies, which should also mean fully conscious and aware, like angels, if you will, or even beyond that. And that you would have to be, praising the Creator and in sync with where He's going and looking forward to whatever He's going to do as being good and right and perfect and going with it. And I guess during this time, the thing is each one should try to be led by the Lord rather than by popular opinion.
Absolutely. And, in the first hour you were talking about, how do we get back in touch, and how do we focus on what's important? And in my mind, it's simplicity. Simplicity is where you're going to find God when you kind of take a little time away from all the distractions in the world, and there's so many of them. And I think this first, I really realized this, and you get a glimpse of it when you go on camping trips and stuff like that, and you're just in a place where it's just a little calmer. You don't have the power lines going overhead. They're not, the airspace is good, so they're not, hosing the sky down with chemicals, and it's just a nicer thing. You're grounded. You're actually sleeping on the ground. But I noticed it other times during power outages and storms and ice storms and blizzards and all those things, when you don't have the option of the TV, the internet, the cell phone, everything else, video games, all going on at the same time, and you kind of have to sit and catch your breath. And yeah, you might feel bored, but it's just because you've acclimated yourself to the idea that you always have to be busy and distracted at all times, a little functional ADD, ADHD. But really, when they say the devil's in the details, I think it's not just about things being more complicated, as they have more components to it. I think it's about the fact that that's the whole idea, is distraction.
Mm-hmm. Well, as far as finances and all, this Kaleman guy, also predicts, and he has quite some credentials too. I believe this is where the information on the 28th comes from him. He's and the video you're talking about. It's Carl Johan Kaleman has a PhD in physical biology from the University of Stockholm and is cited 1,500 times in scientific literature. He's been a senior researcher of the environmental health and University of Washington in Seattle and served as a cancer expert for the World Health Organization. And he's, with his Solving the Greatest Mystery of Our Time, the Mayan calendar, he initiated, which he began in 2001, he initiated the evidence-based study of the Mayan calendar, which is followed by the Mayan calendar and transformation of consciousness, and the forthcoming The Purposeful Universe, or whatever, from him. He has a website, Kaleman.com, Calleman.com, the forthcoming book, and it describes this phenomenon, which he pegs at, from his research, his scientific research, is October 28th, 2011. And he also claims that he says this about God. He says, personally, I do not believe that there is a God who intervenes in the creation to change its course, because that would imply that it wasn't perfect to begin with. So the way it works is that the galactic underworld favors the right brain half to the detriment of the left brain half that is mediating abstract values, and is thus that we now see a collapse of abstract values such as the digits in bank computers and paper bills. But the actual abstract values are far from being wiped out, because the abstract, or I guess he would call that the left brain that mediates abstract values, factors in everything else. In other words, there's kind of maybe he has that backwards. I don't exactly know. I thought right brain was more the creative part, but maybe it's the left brain that's more the creative. At any rate, if this thing is going to happen, and if it's timed with God's timing, then obviously when the Bible says, when Jesus says, you've got to be ready at all times for the coming of the Son of Man. And then last week I had a podcast that I was sort of revelating and saying, just going by the Spirit, and saying that the return of Christ is cosmological. So that's why Jesus says, in Matthew 24, he goes, don't look over here when someone says Christ, or I'm the prophet, or I'm the prophet, or I'm Christ. Don't believe them, any of them, or he's in the field or something, because it's not a he. Mm-hmm. It's a thing that's happening.
That was an excellent podcast.
Remember that? Okay, well.
Fantastic.
Okay, but that, it was the thing I was given, and now this kind of confirms it. It's not like there's a he. It's not. What he's telling us there is, don't look for a man, saying I'm the Christ. Mm-hmm. That's really what he's saying. Don't look for a human being, trying to occupy. It's more like, two are in the field and one will be taken, which I interpret to be, and one will remain. I interpret that to be that some are prepared and some are not.
Right. And that, I think, is the most important thing people can think about, really, in this time. When you got preachers and whatever saying the end of the world is this date, or you got other people saying, oh, it's this date, or some people saying, World War III is going to happen here, Planet X is going to hit here, massive earthquake is going to happen then, whatever that means, it doesn't really affect me. I'm not the kind of person like, oh, my God, I'm cashing out all my stocks and I'm going to Vegas, and I'm just going to party for a weekend, just blow everything. Like during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we heard stories like that, people just freaking out. I say this, it doesn't matter if something happens or doesn't happen, because I'm ready at all times. When you look at a firefighter, for example, they do their shift 24 on, 48 off, right? So they go to work and they sit in the firehouse. There's going to be false alarms, but the point is they're always ready. They're right next to their truck. Everything's gassed up. They got their clothes ready to go. Mm-hmm. And that's that. So, and I'm talking about spiritual preparedness. I'm not talking about like a bug-out bag and you got your...
I understand. I got the metaphor, yeah.
Yeah, I know you did. I'm just, trying to clarify. I don't want people to think I'm saying it's time to head for the hills, because, honestly, if things go down the way they seem to be described, there's not going to be any hill that's going to protect you.
Yeah, but I was just going to say, what are the hills?
Exactly.
What does that mean? What is define a hill?
Yeah.
To some people, it might be safe at the top of the Empire State Building.
That's right.
I mean, I find it interesting that our friend Satan's penis, the Washington Monument.
That's the second time you've been able to squeeze in the penis here in this conversation.
Well, I'm just
Good
saying, this year it was cracked. Is that not an omen?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be like a bad omen for them?
I would think so. I would think it's time for them to patch up the penis and pretend like nothing ever happened.
They have people scaling it now, with scaffolding and trying to, look for any kind of damage. And I'm just like, the minute that thing tumbles, even better, disappears. People don't really understand. They don't get it. What it represents is worshiping the earth and idolatry is what it's not necessarily just because it's a fertility symbol from the pagan times. One could argue that it's just a benign symbol. It doesn't mean anything. I'm saying it's idolatry to the ones who are in the know, and therefore it's still bad. Just like the pentagram shape of Washington, D.C. That's bad. That's like putting a middle finger in God's face and saying, screw you, I don't need you. And that's the problem. And I know I sound like a blithering idiot myself when I'm not calling other people idiots. I'm like the blithering idiot who's been on this thing for 10 years to telling them, prophesying to them, you've got to remove this or, basically you're going to curse the nation. I mean, at the time where you need your soul, where America needs her soul, the soul will not be intact because in our name, they've been waging a war against God while pretending to be in concert with God.
Mm-hmm.
And that is it's silly and it's ridiculous that we have to even have this conversation, but I guess we do. And now that if it's possible this is the end, I suppose now is a time for a lot of you people out there who are on the fence, and a lot of you who tune in and sneak. The last time I looked, we'd increased just in the last 3 days 2,500 listeners.
Mm-hmm.
From 20,000 now to like 23,000. And so I'm wondering, with this increase that's been almost exponential for the last couple of weeks, which I can't explain. Maybe it's because we're coming into this end thing and people want to get right with God. I don't know. But if you're sneaking around listening to this thing, because you will be on the podcast if you're not hearing it on WWCR, I would say this is the time, forget what I said in the last podcast, which I was just frustrated. So I'm going to put it up anyway. I put everything up now. I don't pull the punches anymore. But, bottom line, about formal repentance because the end might come someday. Why don't you just factor in that on October 28th, 2011, that's the end of your life. All of you in the game, all of you playing Satan's game, just consider yourself the clock punched on that day. So what's your response today? Isn't it time to come clean? I mean, isn't it time to just admit we're just human beings here? Mm-hmm. And isn't it time for you, if you've lost your soul somewhere, to try to find it?
Amen.
Forget about your gold and silver. I mean, I don't know who you're going to trade with on that day.
Right.
It'll be worthless.
No, I completely agree. I think let's scale it down to the most basic common elements, and that's what it is. It's your spiritual connection. Look, I mean, some of the most devout atheists or agnostics will all acknowledge that there is something to the spirit. There is something to that connection. And I think that if that's the case, when everything else is stripped away and that's all you have, well, there you go. I mean, that it should be common sense to know that there is an importance that's put on that is never highlighted in this society. It's never highlighted in this world, and there's a reason why. It's because, like you were saying, the politicians want to say, even if they need to create it, they want to say, this is the problem, I will fix this problem. And we're like, oh, thankfully there's someone there. And that's the biggest problem I have with politics. And we saw it with Ron Paul, and everyone saying, Ron Paul will fix this. And I said,
no.
What a terrible burden for that poor guy. The idea that everybody's saying, this guy will take care of everything, I can go back about my business. Obama had the same problem.
Yeah, we're looking for a safe.
Will fix this.
Yeah, I get caught up in it too when you watch the news and stuff. you start thinking about a man-made solution, and right there, that's against God's will. Right there, you're out of
You
it.
were the one that taught me that. You said this world's tied in knots that man did not tie and man cannot untie. And I said, that's profound.
All right. Well,
You're right.
here's something that's interesting. There's a commentator on this. I'll give you the links when I put this up at zephdaniel.com after this is over. But here's what he says, that what's interesting about the Mayan calendar is that ending on October 28th, 2011, is that it is in line with biblical predictions at the end of time on October 21st, 2011. The basis for this date is called Judgment Day, and it is as follows. It will be exactly 13,023 years from the creation of Adam and Eve on October 21st, 2011. Now, I don't know where they get these dates. I'm just going to run this by you, Frank. The number 23 in the Bible has always represented judgment. These 23 years of judgment is the true length of time called the tribulation period that began in 1988. It will be exactly 7,000 years from the day of the flood to October 21st, 2011. Even God said himself in the Old Testament, a day is 1,000 years and all that. It will be exactly 2,000 years from the true birth of Christ, which is October 21st, 2011. The Bible's mention of a global earthquake that will occur on May 21st, 2011. Well, what happened on May 21st, 2011? I can't even remember now. Was that the Japan quake? When did that?
I believe it was.
Okay, which is when the rapture is supposed to occur. Okay, for 5 months after this earthquake, God is supposed to unleash terrible global catastrophes that will end on October 21st, 2011. On this date, God will destroy this universe with fervent heat. Okay, we get that from the Bible. That is biblical. God has always used natural disasters to carry out his judgment against mankind. And if you look at Revelation, when the angel pours out this vial or that vial, they're talking about catastrophes. You know, natural, what we would call natural catastrophes. He says, God has always used natural disasters to carry out his judgment against mankind. And then he says, the Mayans, what's interesting, the only thing I could speculate is that if God took 7 days to create the universe, it will take 7 days to destroy it. Another spooky coincidence is that October 21st, 2011 is a day the Mayans have numbered 13.13.13.13.13.13.13.13.13.
Wow.
Oh, that was March 11th. Okay, so not May. So we didn't get the global quake. Well, that's okay. I mean, this is...
Well, you know, that's interesting, though, because the video that I was referring to, it's actually entitled, and people can check this out on YouTube, it's called The Next 3 Months on Planet Earth. And on that, they have a thing called the 9 cycles of creation, or the 9 levels of consciousness, and they break it down by dates and years. And they basically say that on March 9th, 2011 is when the final cycle began, and that final cycle goes for like 200-something days.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, what it says is that in that final cycle, that it will seem like time is speeding up, but what actually is happening is that the human being is going through a consciousness shift every 18 days.
Right.
So it's pretty intriguing because that's pretty close, March 9th, March 11th, either way.
And what about the movie where we had Morgan Freeman as the president?
Deep Impact.
Okay, isn't that bizarre that there's a parallel to that? But anyway.
That is interesting, and I remember thinking about that at the time. And, of course, Deep Impact came out probably within a month of Armageddon coming out, which was also about an asteroid of some sort.
And there was also a mini-series that we just saw called The Event, which actually got canceled by NBC before they could even finish it. But the very last show of The Event, and I would encourage, I found it fascinating. True or not, I don't know. But if you liked Lost, if you liked 24, if you like those kind of things, you'd love this. Anyway, the last thing they had was that they were going to bring their people, the aliens were going to bring their people to Earth. And the way they did it is they brought the whole planet, which ties in totally with the whole Nibiru, thing. And then there's a lot of people on YouTube calling Nibiru Elenin.
Mm.
And then, so we've got all this kind of stuff going. And, we're not going to be able to figure it all out and say this is this and that's that. We're just going to have to say, okay, here's some information. And with this information, you can go into the spiritual realm and try the spirits for yourselves.
Yeah.
But I'm remembering back to now, it's almost seeming haunting that Well, gee, what would you do if you had a month to live? Okay, folks. Frank, let's say we got a month to live. What are we going to do?
Well, it's funny because we mentioned this almost last time. I think what you do is you find the things that bring you some joy. You find the ways that you connect with God. For you, it's probably surfing. It's a joyful event. It's something that puts you more in touch with God. It's almost like a spiritual retreat.
There's no way I can get it. There's no way I can get in shape by then. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It takes a month just to be able to paddle. But for me, so I would love to go back to the ocean. But for me, I guess it's gonna come down to I like to wander around the earth.
Yeah.
That's my new thing. I like to wander around and look at beautiful things, and that's my real joy right now. So that's what I guess I'll do.
It. You've got, the world's a painting, and it's signed by God, and there's a lot of beautiful things out there. And if you're finding ways to connect with Him through that, then do it. And if you find it through human connection, the people you love in your life, connect with them, spend some time with them. I mean, how many times do you hear stories of people saying, "Oh, I just never got a chance to tell so-and-so I love them," or whatever. So sure. I think just make the most of the time that you've got. It's all we can do.
And, maybe we should just go without food and not kill Bambi.
But I heard what you said to those sheep. You're not going to fool me. Put the phone up to the ear. You're going to die.
I'm sorry. I was just in a grumpy mood.
I think PETA's going to be coming after you now, brother.
I'm sorry. Hey, but it was so funny to have actual sheep and not a sound.
Hilarious.
To have the actual sheep there. What are they doing? Bleating, right, Trish? Bleating, making that sound. Bah. Yeah.
Well, that might be the first farm animal interview I've ever heard.
It was classic. I know that people are going to enjoy that, and if it takes that to connect us to this, look, this is horrifying, but amazing. And what I'd love to, if I had a bigger show, like all the architecture and the guy out there running the board and all that, and the phone calls, I would tell the call screener right now. Or I would tell people I would take a poll. I would have someone do a poll. How many of you believe, after listening to a little bit of this, that it's possible, not that it will happen, how many of you out there think it's possible that this could, and those of you especially Bible-believing, Bible prophecy folks, how many of you believe this could align, could happen, and could be God's will? How many people believe it's possible? Based on everything you know. I'm not saying to throw anything out. I'm just saying, I wonder how...
I'll tell you what, I would believe it, first of all. And this may, I don't know, this is a little blast from the past, no pun intended, but back in 2004, around the time The Day After Tomorrow came out, there was a big thing in the alternative media about a potential comet impact. And I know you remember this because we talked about it extensively.
Yeah.
What had happened, and this is the brief summary for those who either weren't in the know back then or maybe weren't paying attention to this angle because, the New World Order is coming down the road with tanks to arrest various talk shows from Texas. But the point I'm getting at here is that supposedly there was a shortwave radio feed that came on, gave some coordinates or something like that, gave some coded words, and then it just went away. So it was a supposedly accidental disclosure. Well, anyway, this was translated, and people were speculating on it. Anyway, what happened is that supposedly this credentialed astronomer from Australia came out and said, listen, everybody, there's going to be a huge impact. It's going to hit in the water, and it's going to cause zombies, and it's going to cause pretty much all manner of chaos. Then you started hearing reports coming out that various naval fleets were moving out to sea where they could ride it out as opposed to near shore where they'd get destroyed, and various things were going on. Anyway, every week it seemed like there was some new development that added credibility to this. Well, anyway, the date was set, maps came out, they identified where it was going to happen, and then guess what? Nothing happened. So in the course of the aftermath of this, those who really cared enough to dig deeper on it, it came out that this astronomer guy was a real person, and all his credentials were real. He just never actually said those things. But you notice how he didn't dismiss that any time during this whole little drama that was going on. Anyway, in the aftermath, there was a small post on a message board, And it said basically that, and it's supposedly from somebody in the know, somebody who was affiliated with the powers that be. It said this was a psychological operation. We wanted to check and see how much people would believe, how much credibility the alternative media has to inspire panic. Thank you for your participation. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because if that's the case, well, basically they floated this idea out there a couple of years ago. Nobody really panicked. Nobody freaked out. Okay, this is great. When this does happen in advance of December 21st, 2012, no one will be expecting it. Now think about politics. Like you said, yeah, people are campaigning, people are spending money and doing all that stuff. But for the most part, doesn't it seem like they're just kind of going through the motions?
Yeah, no.
There's a big crisis going on, and Obama's like, I'm just going on vacation. Screw it.
Yeah, when you look at it like that, you have to admit it doesn't. It looks like an kind of a empty act rather than even trying to even fool anybody. It
does. And how many of us out there who follow politics? I know Frankie said he hates politics, and that's why he doesn't follow it.
Yeah,
I follow it because I hate it. So
Trish follows it because she has hope and I
have no hope
in the dream, right, Trish? You've got hope. It's okay, It.
Is in control. There you go. Pat her on the head. Everything's gonna be fine.
No, but, she says the Lord's in control.
And I know she knows that.
But
I mean, you look at it, and Sarah Palin, for example, incredibly polarizing figure. We have no polarizing figures out there in opposition to the presidency right now. There is no Republican candidate who really stands up. There's none who's actually really good. There's none who's capturing people's hopes and dreams and imaginations. It's not happening. It's like they're phoning this one in.
Well, I know that Sarah Palin, for example, who became kind of the non-official head of the Tea Party, has been oddly missing.
Completely.
which is it, again, what that you got to look at that as something weird, and I don't know. It's like the way Obama is behaving. It's like some people say, well, he's beaten up by all the people that don't like him. On the other hand, could it also be that he's demoralized because it's coming to an end?
Well, think about it from a broader perspective, and I think you're right, by the way. Here's Hillary Clinton, a bloodthirsty savage when it comes to politics, who always, if she has to kill people, she'll kill people or whatever.
Yeah,
the point is, she gets what she wants.
She didn't care.
She gracefully bows out. No, not just bowed out. She gracefully bowed out. What the heck? What did she know that made her all of a sudden say, crap, I don't want to be president during this time? I don't know. And then you've got...
we're scaring each other now.
Here you've got Sarah Palin. She's writing books. She's going on tours. She writes another book. She's got her daughters on TV, Dancing with the Stars, all this stuff, and all of a sudden, nothing.
Nothing. And she said she would make an announcement at the end of September, which now has come and gone, one way or the other, whether she's not going to run or she is. And it was oddly silent, which was another thing. And, I looked at her like, because the Lord spoke to me about her and said, because at first I was kind of anti, and then he said, no, don't be anti. Realize I'm going to lift this one up in front of her enemies, in front of all the people dissing her, and establish her before the whole world, which has happened. 2 best-selling books, top movie out on her, and all the negative stuff they've tried, it's just kind of fallen off. So
it's interesting because I told you about when I met her, and I liked her. I did. I had good, favorable impression. But at the same time, I also got the vibe that she was scared.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of what or of whom, but in light of all this stuff, there's something to be said for this. So this video that we've been referring to kind of goes through the motions and said, listen, here's what's going to happen. Basically, societal upheaval. It's not the end of the world, but it is a cataclysmic event that's going to cause the whole world to change. And they go on to talk about how the various things, like the report from Iron Mountain talked about facilitating a one-world government, either through a hoax extraterrestrial thing. Maybe there'll be a real one. I don't know. You've got environmental pollution. You look at what's going on in the Gulf. You think if a massive earthquake happens anywhere near the Gulf of Mexico, we're not going to have all that oil come shooting back out? Of course we will. Environmental disaster, either facilitated or just exploited. also mentioned in the report from Iron Mountain. So basically, there's a lot of different scenarios. So this is not going to end the world. It's going to cause an opportunity for the powers that be to move in. So maybe these politicians are like, let's just hang out, and when this happens, then we'll move in. And we won't be campaigning for President of the United States. We'll be campaigning for a one-world government with me running the show, meaning each one of them would think that. Okay. So it's almost like it's like a precursor, like the deep breath before the plunge, if you will, that's right. Going on right now. They're just waiting to see how they can move forward opportunistically to facilitate something. And who knows? We're going to see people fall off their pedestals. You're going to see heroes rise from nowhere. And you're going to see, the old guard sort of fall away. I don't know.
It's another dimension. Now, I mean, what we're talking about, if this is what he's talking about, if this is the cosmological shift that I've been shown, it's basically another dimension, a dimension where people that are Earth dwellers can't make it into. They can't. It's like being barred from the kingdom. They can't get in because you need something done to your consciousness, i.e. Christ in you, something like that. Or exactly that, in order to then be transformed, because physical doesn't mean anything anymore. 3 dimensions won't exist.
Right.
It's a multi-dimensional situation, and being consciously aware that we exist it's only going to, in other words, we are a part of the birthing process too. We have been being brought to this point. And, it's only people that are, look, if the Lord showed up as the Shekinah right next to you, and he said, okay, son, jump on in, and knowing you might, lose this body and everything else, but he says, jump in to the Shekinah. Say there was a pool, like a swimming pool that was the Shekinah glory, okay? And it's just this intense light and heat that's just vibrating, and he goes, jump in, son, water's fine. Okay, those who hesitate, they're gone. But if you just, okay, Papa, hey, it's you, man, I'm jumping in, and you just jump in. And see, this was a vision that I was given in the year 2000, actually, it might have been 1999. And what happened is I did jump in because I was at that time, so disturbed and so, suicidal kind of, and so beyond everything and just so demoralized and just pushed over the edge. And I was like, I lit up like Christmas, and I jumped in, and I was alive in the Shekinah. I didn't have exactly a body, but I knew I was me and he was Papa. You know what I mean? I knew I was me and he was him, and I needed no body, I needed nothing. I was so absolutely perfected. It was just like the most awesome moment that you could have in your life when you remember the most awesome, like falling in love or some kind of moment that was just, if you could crystallize it, it was like that forever, but it was that feeling of the first moment, no boredom, because it was like that, forever. And and I was me and he was him. And he goes, congratulations, you passed the test. So maybe by imparting this now, maybe this is kind of a clue as to how we have to be.
Well, what's interesting, just on a side note here, the previous, according to that evolution of consciousness, the level of consciousness thing in the Mayan calendar, it says that the previous, this current one started on March 9th of this year, and then the previous level started January 5th of 1999, right around the time that you had that vision. And I think, I've been looking into, time. And I don't mean like, watch and stuff, but actual like the quantum, theory and whatnot about time, because you and I discuss this a lot, and it seems to be something that whenever I've ever brought it up before, it always gives me a huge backlash, with any show subject I ever talked about, dimensional shifting, things like that, because I think there's something to this, and obviously it would be a great boon for anyone, and we've seen it in sci-fi quite a bit. Either to, go somewhere else or to manipulate, our current existence. But, you've told me this before, that, God, as the creator of time as we know it, he's outside of it. Okay? He can't be a part of time as we know it. It's already been done. Like you said, the end's been written.
Yeah, it's written. Yeah.
Done. So that means that in essence, all of this stuff that's going on, in Revelation when it talks about God putting his mark on his people, sealing his people, that could be that consciousness. That's where God's like, you're protected. You can walk through this and nothing's going to happen to you. It's just one of those things. I mean, why would people even take the chance of missing out on that?
Well, it is interesting. Yeah, that there would be no time as we know it here in this post apocalyptic world, if you will, which is really the birthing of the actual world and our coming into it, and it's our inheritance as well. He wants to give it to us, but there wouldn't be time there as we know it, and there wouldn't be space there as we know it. So
Right.
we would have to adapt to a different kind of situation. And as I said, those people that are addicted to this would have a harder time. Jesus said it himself, better than anyone. He said, if you don't hate your mother and your father and your, you know what I mean? That whole line that he said, that verse, if you don't hate, yourself, if you don't hate your situation, you can't be my disciple. Because you won't leave. You'll have to leave them in order to follow me. And
that's kind of always been my take on even the 7 deadly sins as well. It's not scriptural, but the sin aspect is putting something else that you either have a physiological or biological addiction to above God. That something else becomes your priority. That is, that's a bad thing.
Right.
Family, it could be anything, yeah.
And then in Matthew 24, it's really clear. That whole thing doesn't seem to be so much like a prep, like warning that the days of Noah are coming. It's more like you've got to be like this in order to make it. You've got to be, don't go back into your house to get your stuff. You got to be ready to go when I call you, meaning when the cosmological change happens, you got to be ready that moment to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't be going and, like Lot's wife looking back to her, PTA meetings and whatnot back in, you've got to,
first fuck her mom.
Yeah, whatever. You've got to go. And I think this is because when you think the Son of Man isn't coming, i.e. the change, that's when it comes.
Yeah.
And isn't this whole thing the coming of the Son of Man? Couldn't this be that? I mean, but then people say, well, in the book of Revelation, you have 1,000 years of the rule of Christ on earth as king, but then recognize, please, everyone, that he's already a glorified multidimensional. He can be in a billion places at the same time and still the same in the same single person. I mean, he's beyond comprehension at this point. And so it wouldn't be like, the chick tracks, those chick tracks of, kind of like the comic book guy on a throne,
right.
with the same haircut and beard and a robe. It's not going to be like, you know what I'm saying? It's not going to be like that.
Yes.
That's not, I don't think that's what's being described.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about a rule with a rod of iron, I think that means another dimension, a dimension where this world system will not only not exist, but would never be remembered as having ever existed in the first place.
Yeah, well said. Completely and totally inconsequential. And again, the monuments to human greatness gone, unnecessary, not even remembered, like you said. It's just passing through, like Ozymandias. You remember that poem? Love that one.
Yes.
That's exactly what this is. And you're right. And, I thought you made a great point earlier, and I wanted to highlight this too, because when Jesus is talking about, hey, don't pay attention to them saying over here is the Son of Man, over here is Jesus, and over here is, he's come back. Like you said, I think that might be, and there's a lot of evidence, the extraterrestrial connection. I mean, think about it. If you have extraterrestrials come down and they say, listen, just so everybody knows, we're here to fix some problems. We know you had a massive earthquake. You're in great need. Kind of like the politician thing. We're here to help. Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, we seeded life here. So, the whole Bible thing, it was just mistranslated.
Yeah.
We're actually...
That'll be the first thing they tell us. It's interesting. Abductees always report that the first thing out of the mouth of the alien is, oh, by the way, Jesus never existed. Right. It's like, well, right. Methinks thou protesteth too much.
Yeah. It's like, man, can you even say hi first? You just got to jump right into the Jesus
We
thing?
go right into the Jesus, right there. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, by the way, we're 1,000,000 miles from Earth, and we're, don't be afraid. We're here to help you. I guess the scariest words that one could ever hear was, "We're here from the government. We're here to help you." I guess it goes to reason that even more scary would be, "We're here from Planet X, and we're here to help you."
There you go. It's the next stage of corruptness.
Yeah. So it's just a continuation.
Well, there was that great movie with,
Right.
Mila Jovovich. Have you seen that one? I can't think of what it's called, with the alien abduction.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
We're out of time. Frank Whalen, my guest. Frank, how can they get to you real quick?
They can email me through the website, frankwhalenlive.com.
FrankWhalenLive.com, folks. And Frank, it's a great pleasure to have you here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically have you stay on hold so I can talk to you a little bit afterwards. And, these podcasts will be up. This is Zeph Daniel, The Zeph Report. It's The Zeph Report online, ZephDaniel.com. If you want to get any of the podcasts, they go back for years and years and years. So you can go back and there's enough there to keep you busy. Actually, too busy, because you may not have time to. So you better be selective of what you do with your time from here on out. Those of you who need to repent, pray this prayer: Lord Jesus Christ, I believe in you. I believe you are God. You are the Son of God. You came and you died for my sins, and you rose again from the dead, and you are calling me to repentance. I repent, Lord, for everything I've done. I admit I'm a sinner, and I need your saving grace. I need your salvation. Please wash me in your blood, Jesus, that I may be saved. Amen. And that's the shortest version I can do of that. Folks, I'll see you next week. The time's gone so fast. I guess we'll be riding out this apocalypse.